Welcome back to the Shock Absorber podcast, and it is, as always, exceptional to have you along with us. And I have two young, exceptional people along here with me. We said, Tim, you said, I'll throw you under the bus, that we traded in for a newer version of
newer model.
Yeah, brought in his son. Ethan, how are you?
I am well. Hello, guys.
Thank you
Good
for
to be
joining
here.
us. Tell us about this red shirt you've got on. I usually criticise what other people are wearing on this podcast.
Oh, you play
great
because they can see.
Great way to build one another up.
Yeah, that's right. But it's quite striking.
It's very red, isn't it?
It's very red.
It's very red.
It's Disneyland, right?
It is Disneyland. We got this on holidays. They come in a whole variety of colours. It's their thing. They just have this one style that they then just like copy and paste over a whole bunch of different colours and styles and things.
Yep.
And I like this one, and it was cool.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's my story.
Is there a reason you chose red? Just like that,
it just looked cool.
To it.
Yeah, I was drawn to it.
Yeah.
It looked cool. I liked it.
Do you own any Disney stuff, Tim?
Not that I know of. No.
Yep. Me either.
Not as an adult.
I see how it is. Yeah.
I don't think I own any Disney stuff. I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I do.
Yeah. I have a hat as well. I have
white
this,
hat?
and I have a white Disney hat, and that one is signed by Mickey Mouse.
Nice. Wow, the original Mickey Mouse.
The OG.
Yeah.
Which is pretty epic.
Yeah.
Pretty huge moment in my childhood.
Yeah.
And when I say childhood, I mean I was like 16.
I'm
Maybe
glad he can
17.
still hold a pen and sign. I mean,
Well,
because he's pretty old.
Not gonna lie,
Yeah.
he's also got massive hands,
Right.
so I don't
How does he
understand
sign it?
how he did it. And he definitely
Magic.
did it. He did
Disney
it off,
magic.
He definitely did it off screen. Like I didn't actually see him do it. So I reckon I've learnt later that maybe someone else did it.
Oh, controversy.
I know that kind of wrecked my.
Yeah, it destroys dreams.
It did. My dreams were destroyed. Anyway,
Anyway. Well, it's excellent
Talk
to
about
have
my trauma.
both along on the podcast today. We're going to talk about quite a few things. Again, one of the things that often seems is going to come up is friendship, which is something we've been talking about a lot since we kicked off the podcast again. But I thought before we did that, we thought let's talk about something interesting. And it has completely similar. Oh, Lego Masters. You guys have been watching Lego Masters.
We have been watching Lego Masters.
Tim, tell me about it. Because, I mean, I don't even watch free-to-air TV anymore. So
Yeah, this
that's
is the
why.
one and only time that
Yeah.
we actually connect the cable to our TV into the wall or whatever. I don't know how it
The
works.
aerial.
The aerial, that's the one.
We don't
The
actually
aerial.
have a cable. We're using the 9 Now thing. We just know
Oh,
bought
right,
ones.
yes.
Oh, you went
Yeah.
streaming, yes.
Yeah, we're
Yep.
just streaming it.
Yep. But Lego Masters, yes, it's a reality TV show where teams of people come and build things of Lego. And what I really like about it is that it's really joyful. So Hamish Blake is the host. He's got his offsider is Brickman, Jared Brickman McNaughton, and he's the Lego expert, Brickman, and Hamish is the compere, and Hamish knows exactly how to play up the fact that it's kind of reality TV, but it's in a really frivolous, lighthearted kind of way. And he's just perfect for it. Everyone comes in. It's a competition and they're playing for money and prizes and things, but all the teams really enjoy each other and they're encouraging each other and, oh, that's awesome. And, oh, what are you doing there? I like that. And, oh, have you thought about doing this with your one? And so there's this really fun, creative collaboration. And one of the things, even from very early on, is that people get eliminated through the series, and Brickman's usually the one who announces who's leaving, and multiple times he's tearing up as he's announcing that someone's leaving because there's this really lovely friendship which is developed between the people on the show and Brickman, and so it's a really lovely show, and because it's got Lego, the kids really enjoy it. We really enjoy it. We're a Lego family, so yeah, it's great.
What's your favourite Lego thing you've ever built?
For my birthday last year, I got the 1989 Batmobile and Batwing. So from the original, like the Michael Keating Batman movies, Tim Burton, and so there's quite a large model of both of the vehicles from that movie, and so I spent some long service leave building those, and it was a joy.
How long did it take you to build it?
I don't know. I didn't tell myself hours. You kind of enjoy the process.
Yeah, you do.
Yep.
That is the fun thing about it. You can't even see how it's going to come together.
Yeah.
You follow the instructions and then it slowly builds up. You're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah, Lego Masters for you, Ethan. You've been. I was going to call you Stu, but
Yeah, no, I'm loving it. It's really fun. The same kind of reasons. Like, it's just a really wholesome TV experience. It's not this let's watch this reality TV show where we laugh at people who are backstabbing each other or getting cranky at each other, or a lot of the entertainment comes from the drama. Like, it's none of that. It's actually the entertainment comes from people being creative and people being friends. And it's actually really beautiful to watch. Actually, like, it's really genuinely uplifting, really. And every so often there's a bit of tension, but that's only because some Legos breaking. Like, it's not because people are mad at each other, really. It's just like, oh, I'm struggling to build this hot air balloon. Like,
something fell over.
Yeah. They get stuck with an idea. There's been a few in the last season where teams have gotten stuck and they haven't been able to move forward. There's been a blockage mentally to, I don't know how to do this, and so that just causes tension. So there is,
there's tension, but it's not like
you get nice story arcs to it, but it's
I'm not a huge fan of reality TV, but I do like sometimes watching the ones where you've got to be good at something. So like Lego Masters, for example.
They got to be good at it.
My favourite example is Project Runway, which was when they were fashion designers and they had to, there was an elimination, but now there's a new one. So Heidi Klum, you know, the supermodel Heidi Klum, and then there's a guy called...
Sure.
She's married to, or was married to Seal. Anyway.
Sure.
You don't know who Seal is?
Yeah, I know who Seal is, but that doesn't jog my memory at all.
And then there was a guy called Tim Gunn who was like part of the judging, like, but also like, oh, have you thought about doing this? Anyway, so I used to say this and like, make it work, designers, and like would clap and do stuff like that.
That's great.
But it was all about how good you were. And there's a new series that they've taken Heidi and Tim, Amazon are doing it now, and it's called Making the Cut. But I think they've had 3 seasons now, but the winner gets $1 million from Amazon to start their own fashion line. Whereas Project Runway, because it was on Bravo originally, it was made by Bravo, it was on Foxtel. I think you only got like $50,000 or $100,000. Yeah. So on Amazon, they get $1 million to start their own line, and
that's a lot of money.
They get a shop and do all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty cool. But yes, even MasterChef is another good example. You had to actually be good at it to actually do well, and then MasterChef got a little bit boring.
Well, yeah.
I think after 4 or so seasons. But what else? I was trying to think if there's anything else.
There's those the Glassblower show is apparently really, really good.
What?
where they make, what's it called? Blown Away. Braden,
thank you, Braden.
Off screen is saying Blown Away is really, really good.
Right.
The cake, Great British Bake Off, is apparently phenomenal.
Okay.
It's another one of those things. I think that's really similar to Lego Masters.
See, I have no patience for reality TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much, but I think like something like Making the Cut.
Yeah, Blown Away is on Netflix.
Yep.
And Great British Bake Off is on something.
Oh, it's like a British show.
Yeah,
I heard a funny comedian going about, like, can they get them some air conditioning in that place? They're like out there sweating and they're like, today we're making fondant or whatever it was, and it would just melt because it was so hot.
Amazing.
But yeah, that's pretty cool. Cool. We're shifting from reality TV to reality. What a segue. We talked last episode, Tim, Stu and I, about a report that we found from hang on, let me scroll to the top, from the AEI Survey Centre on American Life, and also by Gallup, and saying that the percentage of men with at least 6 close friends fell by half between 1990 and 2021. So that... Looking at that, we want to continue to kick off a conversation about friendship and what we thought. And Ethan, we had a podcast a couple of episodes ago where we talked a lot about friendship. But I thought it worth revisiting this, maybe not just about men, about how society is going. We did talk a little bit about it in the last episode, but a couple of things to think about in terms of the links that it's found, and also just what it reveals about what's going on in society. I think it's something to really think about, and also how we respond to that in our churches and what's going on in our congregations. Stu talked about the fastest growing household in Australia is a single person household, for example. But it also says in this study that there's a lower relationship satisfaction and quality of communication, and also greater fear of intimacy between male friendships, as an example. What else did we have here? The qualities that socialise, they says that we socialise men to value are the same ones that make it hard for them to form lasting connections. I'm unsure about that one. I'm not really sure if it's maybe just the way that we talk about friendships rather than the way we socialize people. And then there's the other one where it's like there's links between health, which are really difficult, and there's a lot of health conditions, but also there's a link between suicide and loneliness in men as well. So with all that aside, and I'd be interested to hear what your perspective is about your own friendships, but also what you think it looks like in society and how as Christians we can relate to that. Ethan, do you want to go be first cab off the rank on what we're talking about?
Yeah, I am probably in that. The survey says a little over 25% of American men have at least 6 close friends in 2021, and I think I'd be in that side of things more than the other side of things. And that's
the close friends. Or
I have more close friends than my friends do.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's a real blessing, and I think actually a big part of that has to do with church, which we could get into later as we talk about responses to this stuff. But I think my life and my friendships are a really good example of, look at all these friends I have because I spend a lot of time with them, and I look at my friends who are not spending as much time with one another, more and more struggling with their friendships. And I think one of the things that is really interesting, I was a guy in high school whose friendship groups were split off into group chats. So I had one friendship group, really, through most of high school.
Yeah.
And that friendship group was divided into 2 group chats on Facebook Messenger.
Really?
And then later in high school, another group joined our group. So there's like our group grew. And then there was 3 group chats. And with different people in them. I was the only one in 2 of them, I think. And that was a really interesting thing to watch as we've left high school, and the people that, despite hanging out together every single day at school, the group chats almost split, and there was only a few people tying one another to one another. This is all just my personal life, and not really any helpful observations as of yet. But it's really interesting to see that what has been cool post high school is the people that have stayed connected are the ones that spend time with one another. And
in the same location,
physical time with one another. And that's interestingly doesn't include going out clubbing. So that has interestingly not counted as spending time together.
But you're saying they go and do something together.
They'll go
during the day.
They'll go to they might go to a pub and hang out and have dinner together. They might go camping with one another. They might go. I have a bunch of mates who regularly will get on a boat and will just hang out on a boat all weekend. That's just what they do together, and they're really, really tight. The boys from school that have not locked into the hang out at church or the hanging out on the boat or the hanging out at the bar once a month, the people who have not locked in there have really drifted away from our friendship groups, and in a lot of cases drifted away from any friendship groups. Interestingly, school is something that has held on to a lot of friendship groups, and uni has not. I have friends who have made friends at uni. However, there is not as many of those as otherwise, if that makes sense.
Because a little bit more transient at uni.
Yeah.
You're not forced to spend time with each other for as long as you do at school.
Yeah, and I heard something recently about you are friends by convenience at uni. I am friends with the person who will give me a lift home every day. Yeah. And I will never talk to them again now that they're not giving me a lift home every day.
That definitely happened to me.
So there's that friends of convenience thing that kind of comes with a lot of uni friendships. And so that's just some what's happening now thoughts.
Well, you talked about the group chats.
Yes.
How do you think being able to contact each other by something else rather than just making a phone call to someone, which is what, Tim and I would have gone through of you call like a landline phone and say, hey, Mrs., can I talk to ex-friend.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think that has changed friendships? Because I feel like it's probably perhaps easier to form, and tell me what you think about this. It might be easier to form a friendship online, but it's almost like a precursor to actually spending time with each other and being friends across that. What do you think?
I think the really cool thing about a group chat, I don't like them. Like, they're not functional friendships inside them, but they're really, really, really good for keeping people connected.
And communication.
So it's, we're going on the boat this weekend. All the boys, are you coming? And half of them won't say anything. And you're like, oh, well, they're not going to come. And we might even follow them up. Like, or we'll publicly call them out in this chat and be like, hey man, like, what are you doing? Are you coming out with us? Because we want to spend time with you. And so it actually is a really cool setup that this generation has of, which is really weird, right? Why does in this age where it is so much easier to stay friends with people because of tools like this, why are the stats saying otherwise?
Yeah.
It's really interesting that we're down to 25% of men have at least 6 close friends, when I reckon way more than 25% of men are in a group chat with about 6 guys.
Definitely.
For sure. I'll die on that hill. Like, so I think it's really interesting that doesn't correlate statistically. But yeah, I personally think tools like that are really helpful if they're used properly.
And I think it really speaks to the broad way you can communicate with the group chat. I'm thinking about even with the parents of my son's soccer team that I coach, you can broadcast a message very quickly and easily, and everyone knows exactly what's going on. Oh, training's cancelled. You just have to send one message, for example. Whereas I think previously the manager of the team would have to call every single household and say training is called off. Blah, blah, blah. I think that's where the extreme benefit it is.
Huge.
There. And then also being in a group chat can be a really easy way to know what's going on, and you don't have to participate to a certain degree as well. But then there's the flip side of that is you miss the whole relational part of being in a group with people.
Yeah.
You talked, Tim, last week about we're made to be together. And that's where I suppose I can flip it to you. What do you think about what Ethan's saying? But also I'd love you to touch on that again, going, because we're saying, well, why are we seeing statistics like the one that we've read out? Where is that coming from? Perhaps the internet and how we communicate on it plays a role, but also how are we created to be relational too?
Yeah. Okay. Lots to talk about.
Sorry.
Bouncing off what Ethan was said about, why we are more connected, but we're more lonely. And this is a lot of social scientists are noticing this. Which at the guts of it means that the connection is not what relationship is about. So it can't be just about knowing what each other is doing.
Knowing lots of people.
Knowing lots of broadcast information about people. You go to your social media feed, Facebook, I know it's a bit of an old person's social media, but it's the type of platform where a lot of people, and so you see their particular updates. Instagram, I think, kind of works similar. Depends your proportion of who you followed, professional accounts versus friends, people you know. But just because you see all of these people's information, there's a certain sense of connectedness. So there's, friends of mine from school that I know where they live in the world. I know the jobs that they have. I know how many kids they have. I know what they had for their anniversary weekend. But I'm not friends with them in a meaningful way, as in haven't talked to them for sometimes 20 years. But we're connected on Facebook. So we get to see each other's lives. We get to sort of, voyeuristically look into each other's lives in a way that can make us feel connected. But it's not real in any sort of deep and meaningful sense. And it's because I do think that there is something incarnate about how God has created us to be, that it's not that we can't maintain friendships out of bodied experiences. And, even pre-internet, you've got people who are writing letters to each other and maintaining good relationships by being able to write to each other and communicate in a way without even having met. But there's something unique about the social media experience and the text chats and those kinds of things, where there is it looks like there's an immediacy to it, but it's a false sense of connectedness and a false sense of community, which is why we can feel so connected and yet be so disconnected in so little friendships, and actually realise, I don't actually know all that many people. I do feel lonely because I don't have those 6 friends.
And perhaps maybe increases, sorry to talk over
No, that's okay.
but also perhaps increases the feeling of loneliness, because I'm connected to so many people, but I still feel lonely. Why is that? And then increases the feelings of, even if you go, I'll do more to online to find more friends, it's still like, this feels like there's something missing. Do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that this can be significant for those when you see your other friends that you think you're a part of go off and do something, and then they post about it on social media, and then you're like, oh, they went and did something. And either I was invited and I chose not to go, like your mates who chose not to go on the boat for the weekend. So you may have opted out of that, or you may have never been invited, which then increases the pain and loneliness even more. It's like, oh no, I thought that I would have been invited to that thing and I wasn't. So that can be really painful as well, and increase that sense of loneliness. Oh, well, am I really their friends? Clearly not, because I didn't get invited to such and such. And there's one of the pain points, I suppose, in friendships can be when you perceive a friendship to be different to what they perceive it as, and you think you're close friends with them, and then you realise that they're going off and having these adventures or doing these things or going to the movies with this people, and you hear, oh, this whole group went to something and you didn't. Oh, that's really interesting. I thought I would have been invited. So that can be a particularly painful point where the loneliness can really hit in and make you feel that there's a disconnect there. So I think that's a significant part of it. Coming back to how do you actually maintain friendship, or what is the guts of friendship? As you were talking, I was thinking there's a connection in friendship between time and task. I'm just coming up with this on the spot, so there's probably
writing it down.
Yeah, probably some social scientist that can give me data on this. But it is about time spent with people and actual time spent, and that could be, it can be online. Stu talked last week about gaming communities who might spend a lot of time gaming with each other in particular campaigns on particular games, whatever, but also incarnate relationships. And this is where that friendship of convenience is real, in a sense that you are spending a lot of time with these people,
and we are friends.
And you are friends. Churches may fall into the same trap as well, that you are friends with these people because there's a convenience of you all happen to be at the same service.
I see, yep.
And so there can be a sense where you're being friendly with all of these people, and they are friends, and you do things together. And this is the other thing, is that it's task as well. So one of the things that we've constantly talked about at Soul Revival is your closest friends are those you do ministry with. And that's both an is and an ought. That is, we actually want you to opt into a model of ministry, which is, I'm going to choose to actively make these people close friends. And so I'm going to choose to put time, effort, attention into these people. But it's also, it is true, not just ought to be true, it is true, because if you are spending a lot of time on a particular task together, then you will be friends with those people. And so it's why people at school or university, if you cover up a whole lot of classes, or at work when you're engaged in a particular task together, you're working on the same vision and mission for whatever the organisation is, blue collar, white collar, creative, whatever it is. If you're working with these people and you're spending a lot of time together, you've got time and you've got task. And those are the things that are driving those relationships. And if either of those disappears, then that's when the loss, you can have the loss of friendship. And when the really interesting thing about, when people move apart is how do you maintain that, or who do you maintain friendships with? And I certainly know that in the ministry world, people who move churches every 5 to 10 years, there's a big question about, well, do you try and keep up with all of those people that you have been friends with? Or in my role, I've been an advisor for almost 11 years. There's been dozens of children's ministers that I've worked with who have moved out of my area or left children's ministry or in different churches, and I would have said I was friends with them during that time. Yeah. But there's very few of them that I would still ring up now and say, hey, how you going? I haven't heard from you 6 months. Yeah. And so there was friendship, but there was a convenience that was driving it because we were on task together. We wanted to deliver excellent, efficient children's ministry in this particular church. We would spend time together on that. And now they have moved to another side of Sydney or have stepped out of ministry or whatever. And so we're not friends anymore because there's not a structure through which to foster that friendship.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. In looking at this data and statistics and even a video I found, it's talking about a friendship recession. I'm wondering, Ethan, you're a youth mission pastor. Sorry, get your title right. Mm-hmm. And then Tim, you're children's pastor. Do you think that's true? Do you think there is a friendship recession?
I think that there is, from my observation, there is a societal need for people to be real with one another. And I think part of that is because people are lonely and no one's being actually them with them.
And they don't feel cared for.
Mm-hmm. And part of that is, maybe there's less friendships going on. Maybe there's... I do spend a lot of time with teenagers, and they are as we were talking about before, they're the ones who are very... maybe we weren't talking about it on here. Maybe we were talking about it beforehand or in this video. They talk about the fact that men's relationships are often tribal, and as teenagers you see heaps of that. You actually see heaps of really good friendships in amongst these solid tribes of guys that roam around the school or stay in the one spot or whatever. But even in that, there's always the one who is not included, or is the one that is left out, or is the even the group that is not included, or the group that is not left out. And however, I don't know, because I don't have statistics probably from within high schools. We have people who are out of high school and are now going, oh my goodness, I'm lonely, where are all my friends? I'd love to see some stuff on teenagers in high schools going, oh yeah, I actually feel really lonely, even though I am in the prime friendship time of my life. Like, this is, if you think about it, that's the time where you're going to spend the most time with people every day, for long hours, all the time. And
I think that's always been a thing.
Yeah, I think
adolescent loneliness has always been a thing.
100%.
And adolescent development is really awkward, and even those who look well connected may not be well connected, or may feel lonely even if they're in the core group. And so there's a million and one teen dramas about it. Absolutely, that's right. Yeah, that's the theme of every teen drama, every movie, every TV show is, I feel lonely, I feel disconnected, whatever. How do I be part of this group? Or there's this lonely kid over there, blah blah blah, and you try and get them involved, and so that's it's not a new thing in that sense. I think, there does seem to be a lot of data to support the idea of a friendship recession, that there is less, people are feeling less like friends, that they have less friends. And so I don't have any reason to deny that that's actually true. There seems to be enough sociological data out there that says that. What's interesting is the causes. What are the causes for that? And what we can do about that. And so there's a video we can put in the show notes about friendship recession, Richard Reeves, and he talks about 4 key things would be interesting to talk about. So one is geographic mobility. So people move around a lot more, and so when you dislocate yourself from the space where you had friendships, obviously you're out of proximity. And so change of proximity is going to make a big difference, because you have all those convenience friendships, which can be genuinely sustaining and genuine friendships. But if you then move out of that, there's a huge amount of work now to put into that. One of the most interesting ones he talks about is parenting. And this is kind of a bit of a double-edged sword from the way he described it, that a lot of parents are putting more time into their kids. And as a parenting advocate, I'd say that's awesome. Like, isn't that great that you're spending more time with your kids? And we certainly wouldn't want people to spend less time with their kids. I don't think that would be a healthy model. But his comment is that if you spend more time with your kids to the detriment of outside friendships, that can be really stifling. And so you're not actually getting adult relationships. And so that's a good thing, particularly if there are parents. If you're in a two-parent home, if you're part of a two-parent household, to be thinking, how do I give my spouse time to be with other adult friends? And then if you're in a single-parent home, or you know those who are in single-parent homes, that's even more important that you actually help that single parent get friendship and proximity to adult friendships, because that's even more isolating, because you're the only or the primary caregiver for a particular child, and therefore you don't actually get the shared in the household. So that's significant. The third one he talks about is workism, and so working longer hours, putting more time into work, and therefore you're not finding those spaces outside of work, so the third spaces that we talked about last week. And then the last one he talked about was social fracturing. So, and this is where if you've got a lot of friendships as a couple, but if the couple breaks apart, there's a divorce or a separation, then the friends often feel that they need to pick a side or just step away because it's awkward. And so when a couple separates, there can be a fracturing of their social situations as well. So they're the four that he gives, which I thought was interesting. What do you guys think?
I think it's also interesting that you asked about the recession, the friendship recession from a person talking about high schoolers, and then you look at the main four reasons for it, and almost none of them apply to what's happening in a high school.
Yeah.
And so as I was trying to think about whether that's happening in high school, it actually there's probably an element of it, but for none,
if we were
of those reasons,
specifically looking at adolescents, we would identify different reasons.
100%. But it was interesting that almost none of them can compute, like maybe the geographic mobility, but people have always been moving. That's always happened. The parenting, maybe kids are more friends with their parents than they are with their friends. The workism, maybe they're more focused on school and getting part-time jobs. And the social fracturing, yet divorce impacts
kids, absolutely.
Kids heaps, right? Yeah. And that all works, but I don't know if any of that is different enough from what it was before to be causing that in high schools. However, it would be interesting to see if we could find another study that's looking at it from that angle.
Yeah. Maybe we can research that for next week. Yeah. Your comment about the parenting one, that kids spending more time with their parents. One of the things, The Coddling of the American Mind, if anyone's read that book, it's an excellent book.
Jonathan Haidt,
Craig Lukiarko.
Yeah, hang on. I'll look it up.
You'll work out how to pronounce that.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Greg, I think it's Greg.
Apologies, Greg, if you're listening.
Yeah.
Shout out to Greg.
But one of the things I identify is that children are spending more time in the home.
Yeah.
And the way that is damaging relationships because they're not experiencing the world outside.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that is wrapped up in safetyism and not wanting to know where your kids are. Wanting to know where your kids are, not wanting to not know. Yeah. And so that's a huge part of it. And kids aren't out in the neighbourhood, in the community, in the streets, just being friends with people around them.
And I think Lukianov, that's how you pronounce it, ties that to the rise of cable news to a certain degree and the publicising more of child abductions.
Yes,
so
they
become
do.
a big thing,
Yep.
and then so parents are far less likely to let their children play out on the street for longer periods of time.
Yeah, and there's the classic example from America is New York, which during the 90s became noticeably safer as a city, but the anxiety of people grew. And so the perception of safety was declining while the actual safety was inclining. And there was a lot of that cable news. There was the picture of the lost or abducted kid on the milk bottles. So all those kind of things in the American culture was that this is a really significant thing. You should be really worrying and panicking about this. Keep your kids safe. But people became more anxious at a time when actually the cities were getting safer as well. So there was a disconnect there. But as a parent, you don't feel that disconnect. You want to protect your kid. And even as a parent, something that Ros and I have talked about is that I know academically that my kid suffering is going to build them stronger. Going through hardships, failing at things, breaking arms, getting lost, all of that at the other side is actually going to make them a much better, well-rounded, psychologically and socially safer person. But I don't want to put them in those situations. I'm not going to intentionally do that. So, there's that. I feel that tension as a parent of that safetyism kind of idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that in Japan, for example, they when kids are ready to go to school, they just send them off on the subway on their own. And there's a cultural expectation that everyone on the subway or anywhere else will just help them, guide them of where they need to be. So because I know that Haidt and Lukyanov start talking about how things have continually changed until we get to a place where there's high levels of anxiety amongst children and teenagers. And they also talk about the connectedness of our world and using the internet and the impact that social media has had on, particularly on younger girls, the increase of self-harming and things like that. It's really quite awful statistics. They've like tripled in some scenarios and stuff like that. And I heard an interesting thing on another podcast because we were talking about society, but also our connectedness, and we're also feeling lonely. That one thing that someone said, and I can't remember, to be perfectly honest, I can't remember who said it, but almost that the fact it was in relation to kind of how, the Twitter mob. Twitter mobs can be created, can all just jump on one thing. Yeah. But it's because we're so connected that we're almost, it's almost like a tribal thing again of like, we're not designed as humans to interact with more than, say, around 100 people. So you're in a village and you interact with that many people and we can handle that. But when we put that out onto a wider stage on the internet, we're not really sure how to handle this, like the criticism or even the comparative side of using the internet. We don't know how to deal with that. So that's where another part of it is, it adds to all that anxiety and difficulties that we seem to be coming out of that. Not really sure what my question would be after that, but do you feel like, I think that's my question is, do you have any personal anecdotes there that kind of illustrate what we're talking about today? Because it's easy enough to talk, I think, about, we can look at this data and go, oh, that's because society's doing this. But where do you see it affecting yourself personally? You said, Ethan, for example, that you don't like group chats very much. Why is that? And then what's your kind of reasoning behind it? Why do you think that it's not a helpful, why is it a helpful, we've talked about why it's a helpful thing to be connected so much, but why would it be an unhelpful thing to be connected so much?
I think there's, Stu talks about this often when I'll talk to him about texting, and he'll talk about how there was a time where you'd call up someone's house and you'd ask if they're home, and their mum or dad would say no, and you'd say, do you know when they'd be home? And they'd say, I don't know. And then you wouldn't be able to talk to them, and you'd have to figure it out later. And there is none of that now. It is this idea of everything has to be instant, and everything has to be perfect, and everything has to happen right. And so a group chat is that on steroids, in that you message 15 people and you expect all 15 people to be looking at you and paying attention and listening to the thing you want to.
Which is really important.
Yeah, yeah. And so you have this idea of if every one of those 15 people is doing that all the time, you are. I'm getting bombarded by text messages at the moment, and that's the other thing. Sorry, it's all these things are vying for your attention, and often it actually ends up pulling you out of real life stuff. Not that this isn't real life, because these are real people and you're having real interactions with them. But I was sitting today at a cafe with a friend and we talked about a book for an hour and a half, and it was really fun. And the table next to us were these two friends, I assume, just ladies sitting on their phone, their dog sitting at their feet, and they were just texting for maybe 30 minutes of our 1 hour conversation. And every time I glanced over, they were back on their phones. And they actually weren't, like, sometimes you'll sit on your phone, you'll talk to someone, you'll be like, oh, I'll show you this video, or I'll get this meme up or whatever. And it's all, or I'm researching something to help the conversation. And that's all helpful, but they weren't actually talking to one another. And it was this thing of, and it's not group chat's fault. I'm going somewhere else now, I think. But we often don't seem to be able to separate the digital and the physical
I think that's
communication.
A good point.
As there are times where we're going to need to actually talk to one another in person, and there are times where we are not. And I think what I was trying to touch on before, when I was talking about being real, was that concept of actually physically being with someone without any digital stuff around you actually feels heaps different. And in my personal life, I see that all the time. And I see that with my friends, as there are those of us who will I'm trying to find a nice way of saying this, who will be more likely to complain about another friend because that friend spent the whole night on their phone instead of hanging out with us. And that's in person. Like, that's not, oh, that guy dogged us to go play video games all night, which also happens. But it's actually this genuine, we are physically here together, but we are not physically here together.
Well, they call it fubbing, I think.
Okay.
Fubbing.
Fubbing is the habit of snubbing a physical present person in favour of a mobile phone.
And I think the phone doesn't care, does it?
No.
The phone's like, I'm going to get as much attention as you can, because that's where it's incentivized to do so.
However, the people on the other side are expecting instant responses and expecting instant contact. So I will be, oh, sorry, I just really need a reply to my friend who just texted me.
And this is
because I do, like, I really need to, you know what I mean?
And this is the whole, like, we're embedded in a culture now. So even if you individually decided, I'm going to be slow to respond, I'm going to be inattentive to my phone so that I can be attentive to the relationships that I have, because we're in this web of expectation of instantaneous contact, you are likely going to be contacted by people who are wanting immediate results. And you, by yourself, choosing to not engage with that may then cost you those friendships. Like, people may stop inviting you to things, stop having conversations with you, there's no point messaging Joel because he never responds. There's no point asking Ethan if he wants to come, because we won't know for the next 2 days whether he's engaged or not, because you've got whatever it is. And so there's this web which it's very hard to disconnect from. And it's the same, I've been thinking a lot about this in terms of the adolescent world as well.
Yeah, massive.
Because there's huge amounts of data that says the best thing to do for your teenager is to keep them off mobile phones for as long as absolutely possible, and keep them off social media for as long as absolutely possible. And so there's the key thing is to be the best parent is to keep them off all of those devices, right? Oh, except all of their friends are on those devices.
They're really isolated.
And then they're isolated. So they're feeling isolated. You're enhancing the isolation. If you hand them the phone and help them to connect with their friends, therefore the social world is now at their fingertips. They can now connect in the way that all of their friends at school are connecting with, and yet you're also handing them all of the other things that are really detrimental about immediacy and screen time and et cetera, and all the damaging things that we clear from the data is absolutely damaging our teenagers.
Which is really funny because there's someone in our church who said they chose not to give a mobile phone to their children. They've got 3 children up until a certain age, and I think their oldest is in year 9 or year 10. And year 9. And the teachers came to those parents and said, hey, can you come and speak at the PNC meeting to talk about how you dealt with this? But it was because they're like, your son is really engaging, he's really fun, and he's really enjoyable, and there's a lot of other kids who seem to have phones and seem to not be able to engage properly on a personal level and that relational level as we're talking about. So yeah, it's a real difficult one for parents to navigate. It's like my kids aren't old enough yet. Yours are a little bit older, Tim, than mine. But yeah, it's something that I'm thinking about a lot of the time is how are we going to handle this? I'm still not sure, actually. Have you had any thoughts about it? Like, how do you handle it with your kids?
Yeah, so we have not given mobile phones until we've just at the start of this year, I've given my year 9 son my old hand-me-down phone, and it took a good 30 seconds for him to be completely addicted, which we already knew because they had iPads, but the iPads were not ones with data things. So they were only useful at home. They were old. I think we bought them for them when they had to bring their own device when they were in year 3. So my older son's, his iPad would be 6 years old. My daughter's would be, 4 years old. So they're older devices. They only work on Wi-Fi. They did have some messaging ability to some of their friends, but not much because they're not on any of the social medias. But yeah, we felt that year 9 was probably about right in that balance between, trying to hold off for as long as possible, but also allowing contact and relationships and those kinds of things. But yeah, it's one of those things where I knew what the results would be. There is addictive tendencies, but then there's also, you might even see this, Joel, with your own kids, where you notice in your kids frustrating habits that you do, and they become even more frustrating because you realise that that's wrong, it's unhelpful, it's damaging to you, and I do exactly the same thing, and so I find it hard to tell you off for it. And so there is that idea, like, I mean, I know that I'm addicted to my phone. I'm always looking for the next ping, wanting for the next, and I have clamped mine down a fair way, and I go through moments where I'll cut everything off, and I've got this little app which is brilliant, which shuts off basically the internet for all my devices, and you can schedule times. And again, you've got to do that in your best moment. So you wake up in the morning, you think, I want to get something done today. I'm going to schedule this to kick in at 8 and not click off until 1. Because if you wait till 8, you'll be like, oh yeah, but I might just check the news, and and then you're down a rabbit warren. And so
I can't remember the name of the tool. There's a tool that does that, but it also donates to charity when you actually break it.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, right. Okay.
So if you break the
this one I can't break.
Yeah. Okay.
There is no option.
What's your one called?
Freedom. Okay. I really like Freedom.
Yeah, I can't remember. That's cool. I can't remember the name of the one that I'm talking about. It's like, but even if you go to change the settings, like, I just want to do something, it'll like, you must connect your credit card to it or something, but it'll take money off your card.
Is it worth $10 to look at this news article or this YouTube?
Which is quite interesting.
That's a very cool idea.
Yeah. So we've talked about, certain things that go on. How like, Tim, you preached last week actually about salt and light, and you precursored that on the previous episode, and how there's almost a mandate from Jesus saying, like, you can make things better, more positive, more powerful, powerfully positive. That's how you described it. Being in a world that doesn't know Jesus. With this stuff that we're talking about, how do we respond and how do we behave as Christians? Because I think sometimes, as you were saying with your parents, you being a parent, sorry, that your behaviour on your phone or your computer might be the behavior that you are asking them not to do, but you are doing it.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same as Christians. And I think I remember I was sick a few weeks ago, and I spent so much time on Instagram. I got so angry with myself, I deleted the app because it was just like, this is providing zero benefit to me. There is no benefit to me right now of doing this. It can be nice for a bit of a brain break sometimes, because I was sick and not doing anything, and I was feeling like, I just kept scrolling, and it was just like, I am feeling like rubbish. I need to change this.
Well, it's really interesting because I think it's easy to sit down and be like, oh, I'll have a rest. I'll sit on my phone for a bit. And I think there is actually nothing restful about it.
No,
it's not restorative.
It doesn't actually do anything from a brain chemical perspective. It actually doesn't.
It overstimulates
you.
Yeah. Yep. And that's another little thing I use for productivity is the Pomodoro method, which is to work for 25 minutes, have a break for 5 minutes, and then just do that ad infinitum. But one of the key things that they say is in that 5 minutes, do not go on screens. Like particularly if you're a screen-based work, if you're doing 25 minutes of screen, stand up, walk away, and absolutely,
get a drink or something.
Do something else, but absolutely don't do any of those things. Not only because you might get caught up and, 5 YouTube episodes later, you've realised that you've wasted your next 3 Pomodoro sessions, but because of that exact reason that you said, Ethan, it's not restorative. You actually don't give yourself the break that you need. And I think that's true as well. And I've done this when I've done coaching with children's ministers, and they talk about, I feel it's taken a lot out of me to go to this school and to teach 3 scripture lessons in a row. I come back to church and I just sit on my phone for an hour. And I've asked the same thing like you just said, Joe. And so do you feel rested after that? Yeah, no, not really. No, that's right. You could probably spend half an hour doing something totally different and then be totally refreshed, and then kick off your afternoon doing something else. Go and have a meal, go sit at a beach or go sit in a park and go for a walk. And so, and again, that's the lie that we have, that we will find rest in these technologies, and we don't. So to go back to your question, like as Christians, I think we do have a responsibility as Christians to think differently about these things, to not be told by the marketing companies, by the
algorithm,
but to be wise to the fact that they are not interested in helping you to become a disciple of Jesus. So there is nothing in the phone. Maybe you might be able to justify 1 or 2.
I've only followed church people.
It's the Bible app, and it gamifies me to have streaks. And if I pray for enough, maybe. But the whole attention grabbing economy is not designed to help you to be a disciple of Jesus.
It's selling your attention.
Absolutely.
It's selling your attention for advertising revenue.
Yep. And particularly these big companies, they have hundreds of people who are psychologically trained, who are in the business of directing your attention back to their product so that you are tricked into feel like you're getting something out of it, when actually it's just all sugar candy and there's nothing substantial to it. And I think it would be wonderful if Christians were on the forefront of saying, this is not a healthy way of living. This is not actually what it means to be human. This is not what it means to have relationships. And so therefore we want to make sure that we are leading culture in salt and light in the way that we use technology.
There's a couple of things you talked about there. The one thing that made me think of, there is, some people may have come across him, is a neuroscientist called Andrew Huberman. And he talks about things like social media addiction and other kinds of addictions. But one of the things is that we were talking about, if I go on my phone, I'll feel rested. But that we actually think we're tricked into thinking that because we get a dopamine kick of some kind, and the apps or whatever we're using, let's say Instagram, for example, is totally designed by those teams through the algorithm to be able to just keep your attention for as long as possible, keep serving you things that you've been watching for over and over. He was saying, though, if the brain is continually subjected to dopamine hits that aren't preceded by effort or a struggle, the brain becomes overstimulated, and that's where you get that feeling. So instead of working for something and then going, oh, I need a dopamine hit. Or let's say you go work out. You do a workout and you feel great afterwards.
Yeah.
You've struggled for that and you get a good amount of dopamine that rewards you for that. But if you have constant rewards of dopamine that, for example, social media is giving you, it tires the brain out and it ends up being almost flooded with dopamine that hasn't earned. So then you start feeling exhausted. But the problem is that also creates continually creates a cycle that you need to keep getting the dopamine. Yeah. So I thought that was really fascinating and a helpful way to talk about it, and using science to think about this a bit more biblically or Christianly, as you're saying.
Yep. That's good. I'm now following him on Twitter, so he'll come up.
He's a bit of a beast, that guy. Like he's a Stanford professor, and he does a podcast and talking about optimizing the human body and things like that. But yeah, he's got some really interesting podcasts. Moving on, because I think this is something that we need to keep talking about a lot of the time. I think that as Christians, I think, as you're saying, Tim, it's almost an imperative to think about how do we do this in a way that can be restorative even, or can be, people use the words redemptive.
Yep.
All those ways of like, how are we sharing the truth, the love of Jesus? And I think, for example, it was one of the motivations behind this podcast, of starting this podcast, was to like, let's use the medium in a way that we can hopefully talk about these things in a way, with a Christian perspective. But I did want to call out a thing that you talked about, Tim, and actually in a blog that you wrote, where you talked about being, we're still on the theme of friendship, is talking about whether you're a leader or friend, especially in youth ministry. And like, let me just throw out this quote that you put on the article, and we'll link this in the show notes, but it says, you started the article with, remember you're their leaders, not their friends. Why did that tempt you to write an article about that?
So a number of years ago now, but it stuck with me, was I was visiting a church, and they were leading their, I think it was a brief pre-ministry briefing with their leaders, and they threw this line out and just said, remember guys, like leadership team, remember our leadership team, you're their leaders, not their friends. So when the kids walk through the door, the teenagers walk through the door, can't remember what age it was, you're their leader, not their friend. And it struck me at the time. I was like, oh, that doesn't quite sound right to me, but I'm not sure why. And what I thought at the time was, oh, do I have to choose between those two things? Anyway, many, many years now later, I've sat down and actually wrote out my thoughts on that, and talked about wondering if we do need to choose in that. And we have talked a lot about how friendship is one of the key values of this church, and that was the first two episodes of the current block of episodes has been on, we still want to be friends, and we're putting friendship as a really high priority. It's one of the strategic distinctiveness of our church, that we're putting friendship high on the agenda. And so I'm not in any way undermining that. I also want to recognise, and this is probably the heart with which this was said by this other minister, that leadership is important, and there are important parts of actually being the mature person who's been delegated responsibility for these young people in the room. It's really essential that you actually acknowledge that and recognise that and use that effectively. And to think biblically, Jesus and Paul call leaders to a really high account. They've got really high value of leadership, and it is irresponsible and potentially dangerous for the adult in the room to not own the leadership responsibility that they have. It can actually go really badly if they just pretend that, oh, we're just buddies with all the kids. It's like, no, you're not buddies, in a way that delegitimizes the power and influence that you have. So there's a right kind of power that leaders have, and it's essential that they use that power for the good of service to the young people, and that's what leadership is. So talk about that. And friendship is that we genuinely want to be friends with these young people. And so that's been really key part of our ministry strategy, is that I actually see these people not as just those in my ministry. They're not just kids or teenagers. They actually are friends, not future friends potentially one day when they grow up old enough, they're friends now, and I value the friendship that we have now. And so in the article, I sort of played those off against each other, and I said, well, maybe is there a way to sort of cut the Gordian knot, like make it not a dichotomy, false dichotomy between those two things? And then one of the things I've been thinking about is whether the language of family, older brother, older sister, might be the way to balance these responsibilities.
Okay.
And so if I enter a room with a whole lot of children and I see myself primarily as an older brother or an older sister in Christ to these kids, then does that help us to balance these ideas? And so I sort of argued in there that I think it does, that it helps me because an older brother has an authority, they have a maturity, but they also are equally part of the family. So there's an equality that comes with friendship. There's a warmth that comes with friendship. And if a good older brother is caring for the younger sibling, but also has a maturity for them and a responsibility for them as well. And so they're able to hold those two things in tension. So, that was kind of where I was getting at with that. So leader, friend, if you go to either of those extreme, you're not going to be doing well in leadership. And perhaps somewhere to actually bring that all together is to talk about being older brothers and older sisters. So that was where that came from.
What do you reckon, Ethan? Does that ring true in terms of youth ministry as well?
Yeah, totally. I think it rings true into outside of youth and children's ministry. I think as we are in teams together doing ministry throughout the church, if we are thinking of ourselves as if you are in a leadership position over someone, whether they are a child, a teenager, or another adult, it is really important to, yes, you are their leader, and that is really important. And yes, you are their friend, and that is really important. And having that balance between them both, and whether that's brother or sister, like that's a really great little terminology. But that dichotomy is really good to kind of get, because dichotomy, was that the right word? Because they're not opposites, so it's not necessarily. But those two things, it's really important to find that middle ground across all of our ministry, is what I'm trying to say. Because
not just kids, not just youth ministry.
Yeah, because it is really important. If I am leading a cleanup team, it is really important for me to be able to lead that cleanup team and have the authority over those people to get them to come every week and get them to actually do their job.
Yes, organise and
do all that stuff. It is on a different level, and it is a different level of responsibility, but it is still a level of responsibility. However, it is also really important, particularly in the way we do things here at Soul Revival, for that leader of the cleanup team to be friends with the people in that cleanup team, because it makes the whole thing work smoother and it makes the whole thing fun and something you actually want to do. If it's just a task, it doesn't actually ring true. And so you want to be able to be doing both in that setting. And that's just a one example of doing it with adults too. I think that's really important.
So let's see if we can tie these two things together. And I'll need help with this. I'm not saying I can do it. So we're talking about perhaps to a degree culture, being Christians in culture and dealing with the extra amount of connectivity, but also the way that it seemingly seems to be increasing loneliness. We also talked about how important friendship is to our health and well-being and things like that. But then we're also talking about being leaders as, friends and leaders at the same time. Are they linked? I feel like they are linked, but I'm trying to come up with the link that, and I mean, the easy answer is Jesus. And we talked about last week, Tim, from your sermon 2 weeks ago about continually circling back to Jesus. And I think we do talk about that a lot on the podcast, and I think it's important to talk about. But can you help me flesh this out a little bit? So how do we use what Jesus has given us, the way that he transforms us, to even allow him to transform those third spaces that we talk about? And how do we also be friends at the same time with the people that we're trying to love? Yeah,
so the danger of adding too many new ideas. There's a great book by a guy called Joseph Hellerman called When the Church Was a Family. And one of the things he talks about is there's a necessary corporateness to our salvation. So when we are saved, in the West, we have typically prioritised the personal relationship with Jesus, to the detriment of recognising that actually the Bible talks about the corporate nature into which we are saved as well. And if we take that seriously, then what it means is that my church is not just an optional place, it's actually an essential place. And so the classic is, there's a great preacher in Sydney by the name of John Chapman, passed away a number of years ago now, but one of his favourite little lines was that being a Christian is like playing netball, it's not like playing golf. And because you can play golf alone, you can't play netball alone. And if someone, you walk past someone shooting hoops in their front yard and you say, oh, you play netball? I play netball. Oh, great. Who do you play with? Oh, I don't really play with anyone. It's like, well, you're not really playing netball then, are you? Because netball is inherently a corporate game. You can't play netball by yourself. It's impossible. If you can practice, you can do a whole lot of things, but you're not actually playing netball. And so his point is that that's what being a Christian is. That can you be a Christian by yourself? Well, I mean, yes, it's possible if you're the only Christian in a village and you have no other way of gathering with other Christians. It's not that Jesus says, oh, sorry, I'd love to adopt you into my family, but there's actually no way because there's no one else for you to meet with, so therefore, sorry, buddy, you're on your own. Of course, that's not it. The gospel absolutely can transform individuals and does transform individuals. But in the West, where we are, in suburbia, particularly in urban settings, if you're of the opinion that, I can be a Christian by listening to a Spotify playlist, a podcast sermon on the beach by myself, the point is, no, you're not actually doing it. You're not doing Christianity the way that God has actually designed you and the church to do it. And so how that wraps up all these things is that we will be meeting together with God's people to actually do Christianity well, like not just well, to do it right, to do it the way that it actually has designed to be, is that we will be meeting regularly with other Christians. And then you are in proximity, and then you are having these, what did you say before, Ethan, that friendship of convenience. Like there is a convenience there because you're actually hanging out together. Yeah. You're always there and you're doing stuff together. And if you come to church, not with a consumer mindset, but with I'm going to be a productive member of this community and I'm going to contribute in meaningful ways and participate, then you have the time and then you've got the task that you're actually engaged together. So that will be the solution to the friendship issues as people are saved by Jesus into community and actually actively live that out purposefully and meaningfully. And so that, I think, is the answer to tying this all together, because it answers why is there a friendship issue? Because people aren't hanging out together, because we're too overly individualistic, because we're finding friendship in digital, not physical spaces. And the church is the answer to those things, I think in very significant, meaningful ways, because that's what God has designed us to be.
It's the body of Christ thing that you're talking about, and we're all put together for a reason. And I think that's where, like, that regular meeting together, and I speak from personal experience that I just like, if I don't go to church for a week, if I had something on or whatever, like, God, I feel less, what's the right word? I don't feel as ready to be a Christian, I suppose. Whereas if I'm meeting regularly with Christians at least once a week, if not more, because even more is better, you could have Bible studies and things like that. So, hey, we're doing this together, but also we're not alone. Yeah. And, there's the whole thing of, like, when two or more gather in my name, it says in the Bible that I am with them. So when we're gathering together, we have the Holy Spirit, but then Jesus is with us as well. Like, there's a lot happening there, I think, that we maybe don't realize. So then we can take that, what's going on there, and say, well, these are the problems that we're experiencing in terms of whether it is in digital spaces, whether it's children are using their devices, whether it's how we interact with our devices. Because I think if we think about at church when I'm having dinner with I don't think I touch my phone. I very rarely will be touching my phone. I mean, I've recently pursued a hobby in enjoying watches. One of the good things about watches is I don't check my phone for the time anymore. And it's like, if I need to check the time, I've got a watch to check the time, and I have to pull my phone out and then look like I'm, was it fubbing? Fubbing someone. So, sorry, I talked about a lot of things there, but I think there's very much something in what you're saying, Tim, of if we're meeting together regularly, then we can perhaps combat these difficulties in a way that is hopefully honouring God as much as possible, and also redeeming those spaces in a way. Ethan, final words before we wrap up the podcast.
Yeah, I just think that all of those things come from a sense of commitment. I will be a contributor in this space if I've committed to these people, and I've committed to this friendship, and I've committed to following God at this church.
And it's countercultural too.
Yes, massively. Because in all of this, commitment to these people and to Jesus and to the way He is working in this place is so important, and it will enable you to. You said another word was you contribute and something else.
Participate,
yeah,
maybe?
Yeah. So both of those.
And not consume. All those three things come from I have committed to this. It's not like I can rock up and contribute every month, and I can rock up and I can participate every 6 weeks. I don't know, like, because I'm like, I'll do the thing when I'm on, or I'll come to church and read the Bible out in front of everyone, and that's actually going to be the only time I'm there all month. Like, that's actually not necessarily what we're saying.
Well, no, because your level of the depth of your relationships will be reflective of the amount of time you spent there.
Completely. Yeah. And so that all comes under this thing of, are you willing to commit to this? And Tim said something at the very start almost about how when we were talking about leadership, we were talking about committing to friendship in these, like when you're invited into leadership at Soul Revival Church, you're committing to make these people your friends and your close friends, and that now that we are not a youth group anymore, we are a whole church. That principle still stays the same. It's when you're rocking up, are we able to commit to being friends with the people we are with, and that I think is that will then lead into, if I'm committing, I'm gonna contribute, I'm gonna participate, the last one.
Participate?
Not consume.
Not consume.
There we go.
Yeah, I think they're all like really things that are worthwhile considering for a long time, and they require a lot of thought and a lot of reflection and even prayer. And I think even me doing this podcast today, I've been even more committed. A while ago, I set up a thing for my phone where if I triple click the power button, it turns to black and white. And so you're not as drawn into the apps that will waste your time, or not helpful for social interactions. And during the podcast, I just switched it to black and white. So I think it's good, and I think we all have to probably do it in our own way as well. But I think there are some core tenets around things like that can be informed by us being Christians that we can all work on together. So I think that's really good. It's been a really good podcast. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been excellent, as always. If you do have any other questions, or you do want to call us out on something, or something that you would like us to talk about, you can email me at joel@shockabsorber.com.au, and we will definitely bring it to the podcast lights that we do have set up. Subscribe if you haven't, whether it's on YouTube or on your favourite podcast app. We'd love you to continue to do that. We really enjoy having conversations with people who say, I listen to the podcast. That's always really fun. Anyway, continue to think about the things we've been talking about. We'll keep talking about friendship. I think it's very much a theme that we're talking about at the moment. So, and whether it's leadership or whether it's outside of leadership circles. But for now, that'll wrap up the Shock Absorber for this week. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
And one way.
One way.